What's going on, guys? It's Scott with the Pocket coming at you again with another gaming video. Today we're going to be doing a Half-Life chapters tier list. This is a game with a very strong fan base and a lot of fans that feel very strongly about things like this, so I'm very interested to see what everyone's opinions are on my list. So don't hesitate to leave your thoughts in the comments and let me know how you would have ranked chapters differently compared to me. Huge favor you guys could do for me is dropping a like on the video to push it out to more fans of the Half-Life games. This is such an awesome community, and I'm glad to call myself a part of it. Me, what's going to go into consideration is first time playthroughs. I am going to do my best to consider, but I am going to base each chapter on replayability too. The things that matter that I'm going to be talking about are going to be how does this push the story of the game forward, what kind of novelty and variety, new things are you introduced to. Obviously Half-Life is famous for puzzles too, so that's something I'm going to consider. Are there good or bad puzzles in that chapter? And then there's lots of platforming, which is historically janky in Half-Life, great for the time but janky compared to nowadays. So whether that's annoying or fun, I'm going to consider as well. For each of the tiers, we got D tier. This is just straight up bad. Don't really have good things to say about chapters that I'll be putting in that tier. C is like there's some problems that I can agree with, but I don't hate it. So chapters that are just kind of not that great in my opinion are going to go in C tier. And then B tier is a decent chapter that has some issues, but I also think there are redeeming qualities that lift it out of just kind of the average, graded for existing C tier. So that's what B tier is for. And then A tier is going to be a great chapter with variety, different things. It's not repetitive, and it has only a few small things that hold it back from being the next tier, which is S tier, a near flawless chapter, and considered widely to be the best parts of the game, and in my opinion what those chapters are going to be. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so starting things off, we have the very first chapter of the game, Black Mesa Inbound, where you start off inside of the train car and you are going throughout the facility and you're just seeing the massive scale of Black Mesa. And not only that, the train car is kind of giving you the same rundown it gives you every time, I would presume, that you are on your way to work. You got to get all these hazard checks, and it's also listing to you, who you are, that you're an MIT graduate with a degree in theoretical physics, you're a research associate in the Anomalous Materials section. So the game is introducing to you basically exposition, and it's for the time of 1998, it was a very revolutionary way to go about it. The developers talk all the time how you just kind of get plopped into a game and the action starts right away. I think this really does a good job of setting the tone for the game and kind of explaining to the player kind of who you are and what you're doing there, obviously without revealing too much, but it gives you a great idea of what's going on, and it makes it very clear to the player what kind of story this is kind of going to be. And it always gets me. I never skip this part. I enjoy listening to the tram car and kind of looking around and being like, wow, like look at this facility and all that kind of stuff. So it is great from that sense, but overall you are just sitting in a tram car. You find out you're late to work and you get in there and then you're pretty much into the next chapter, Anomalous Materials. So there's not much really to boast about besides it just being a good start to the game. So I'm just going to throw it in C tier. Because as I said, there really isn't too much going on and you're just kind of observing and taking everything in. So I do appreciate that, but I can't put it above some of the other chapters for the reason that you're just kind of going about it, right? All right, so up next, I am going to go in chronological order, which means the next one will be Anomalous Materials. And this is, of course, where, you get into Black Mesa, you find out that there's this system crash, you're late to work, all the scientists are very anxious, you can go around and talk to them. There's little Easter eggs, like you can, of course, overheat the soup in the microwave and blow it up. And you go and grab the suit, and you find out that, you're going to kind of be one of the main men behind this stressful experiment that's going to happen today. You go and grab the suit, and then it starts listing off all of the, audio announcements that it gives to you. Welcome to the HEV Mach 4, and it just lists off all that stuff, and it's so sick because it really feels like for a game with a silent protagonist, I think this does a really good job of filling that void because it's kind of like an AI companion, kind of narrating what's going on to you. You know, oh, you just got a fracture. You know, that fall damage really had effects on you. Automatic medical systems engaged, or and when you get hit by an attack from like an enemy, you'll know, oh, is this like a toxic thing, or electricity, or whatever it may be. It's, I think, always awesome when you put the suit on and then you hear the beat, and then of course, it doesn't just stop there. You can kind of go around and you see the G-Man for the second time. You do see him in Black Mesa Inbound, but you see the G-Man and you see him kind of arguing with a scientist, and you see in the adjacent room that the scientists are kind of doing like these last minute calculations. And like I said, every scientist you talk to says like, go away, Gordon, I'm busy, not till after the experiment. And it really starts building the tension that, you are late to work, but also this is like a very big day. And you find out that, this administrator has got this pure sample, purest you've ever seen. And you guys are going to run the anti-mass spectrometer at 105%. You see some of the equipment break, and the scientists, kind of chattering amongst themselves about the equipment's not supposed to do this. And it just keeps building the tension. So you go in, you turn on the anti-mass spectrometer, you push in the sample, everything goes wrong, and then you're into the next chapter. But all this suspense and build up to the point that you're getting teleported around and the residence cascade occurs that you were warned about, I think is just really, really good build up, right after Black Mesa Inbound, to perfectly set up the story. And if you are a veteran player, it does not take that long to get to this point. So I think it's a very, very good beginning to the game. These two chapters, honestly, Black Mesa Inbound and Anomalous Materials, could be combined. Great for the story, but really gameplay wise, not much going on. You do get the suit, which is cool, but I really can't put it above some of the other chapters. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right above Black Mesa Inbound in C tier. Still a great and fun chapter. Honestly, pretty much none of the chapters in this game are like truly awful or anything. So C tier in terms of Half-Life relatively is not bad. This next chapter is where most people would consider the game really starts. Unforeseen Consequences. This is the immediate aftermath of the Resonance Cascade after you're teleported all around and you see all the aliens and stuff, and it's just utter chaos. You feel the utter despair and the mistakes of everyone in the facility. You immediately get out. There's dead scientists. You find the scientists, asking and begging, why didn't they listen to us? We knew this would happen and this would be a big mistake. And it's the first time you have to kind of get a scientist to open a door for you, as you're reminded that you, Gordon Freeman, are only a level 3 clearance in Black Mesa. So you do that, and you are introduced to the first batch of alien enemies that you will see throughout the game. You see first a head crab, and you are weaponless, so you actually have to run away from a head crab to start the game. There's more chaos with like the lasers that you have to dodge, and you pick up the crowbar, and this is your very first weapon, and then you are forced to discover that you can, actually break stuff with the crowbar like glass and kind of, use that to navigate the facility. That's good stuff. But then, you can eventually pick up a pistol after seeing a zombie, one of the head crabs infect one of the science team members. Especially if you're playing on hard, these guys are tanks and, they take quite a bit of bullets, but they're not hard to kill. You see the Houndeyes and then the Vortigons, which at this level are pretty tough when you only have a pistol and a crowbar. And then eventually at the end, you have the notorious section where you're going down the elevator, the giant elevator platform, and you have all the head crabs jumping at you. If you're experienced enough, it's not too hard to dodge them or anything, but first time around, this could definitely be frustrating. I remember my first time playing after a while. I definitely had a little bit of trouble playing on hard mode, trying to survive that section. And then don't forget the bull squids. As you're navigating through, you see that they're quite tanky, the tankiest of all the units you've seen at this point, and all the units are very interesting, all the enemies. Like I said, it just really sets in that, you guys have all made a massive mistake. There's all these little cinematic moments of, scientists and security guards getting pulled into elevator shafts, a scientist, at the edge of a broken walkway that collapses if you walk up near him. I've actually only been able to see that once, And it's just a really, really great build off of those first 2 chapters where, you know, you have all this tension, and then this is the major consequences that you see. So I do really like Unforeseen Consequences, mostly for the story purposes. Obviously, gameplay wise, you know, it's kind of primitive compared to what you end up doing later in the game. But in terms of first time playthrough and story mode, it really carries this in the tier list for me. Replayability, I still enjoy it. So I'm going to put it in A tier. I love Unforeseen Consequences, and I never would skip it or anything or rush past anything. This is when you can really start exploring Black Mesa and the immersion can really start to take over. So Unforeseen Consequences is going in A tier. Up next, we've got a great follow-up to Unforeseen Consequences, and that is Office Complex. Office Complex, you end up into this quite literally office complex of all these scientists that, just like you, are trying to survive out here, except most of them are helpless. They don't have weapons. They don't have the HEV suit. Same thing with the security guards. I think I forgot to mention in Unforeseen Consequences, I think you see barnacles, but you will also see them in all over Office Complex, and you will see them snatch up scientists and stuff like that. And it's kind of like a continuation of Unforeseen Consequences, except it's a bit more, I guess, stable. You know, things are still falling apart and stuff, but kind of got yourself together with some weapons and stuff. And this is where you're really introduced to the navigating and some of the sort of puzzle solving, as, you know, especially towards the end where you've got to climb into the vents. You know, you've got to climb into the vents to get around to different sections as they're blocked off by electricity that's electrocuting water on the floor, and you got to turn that off. And then, you know, you can even find grenades in this level. You can get the scientists and security guards to follow you around, heal you, and help you out and stuff like that. And then towards the end, you get into the meat locker. After fighting through all the Vortigons and the bull squids, you got to stack up the boxes, turn on the, you know, moving platform, and then jump across to the other side. Eventually, at the end of that, you run into a scientist who says, oh, the military is going to be coming to save us, and we're going to come get rescued. And as they've said to you in Unforeseen Consequences, you got to get topside. The elevators are down, so you either got to climb stairs or whatever it may be. It's just, I think, a really great follow-up to Unforeseen Consequences. It's a nice introduction to the puzzling and the pushing around the boxes. Revolutionary stuff at the time, not quite so much now, but still fun and well done enough that I still feel like it holds up generally well enough today, especially if you don't mind the graphics. If you've played this far into the game in 2026, you're still going to want to finish it. I think it's a great chapter. I don't think it's quite as shocking as Unforeseen Consequences, as it's kind of like a continuation of it in my mind. So I'm going to put it in A tier, but just... All right, up next, we've got the 5th chapter in the game. We've got Hostiles. Now, this chapter brings one of the most shocking moments in the game, at least to me. And for first-time playthroughs, you know, this is going to kind of carry this ranking. But there's also other great things about this chapter. So, as it was mentioned before in Office Complex, the military is coming to kind of contain the situation and, you know, presumably rescue you guys. So you fight your way through more packs of Vortigons who are kind of spawning in packs. Eventually you discover some turrets and trip mines that emit lasers that, if you run into them, will blow you up. Or if you run into those, they will activate the turrets. The red lasers are for the turrets. And then you do some parkour and you navigate towards the top of the complex. And I forgot to mention, of course, this this chapter starts off with one of the funniest moments where the scientist is saying, oh my god, for God's sakes, open the silo door, we are doomed. And then, you know, he runs down and, you know, he gets killed, and, you know, the security guard gets pulled into the vent by the zombie. And just the chaos, even for the graphics at the time, is just so well done, and it continues to add to the atmosphere of the game. But as I mentioned, you fight your way through the Vortigons, who are like spawning in packs and stuff. You discover the turrets and the trip mines. You do some parkour and you navigate to the top, where eventually you can hear radio chatter, and you're like, oh man, it sounds like Marines. Yes, they're here. You know, they're going to rescue us. You know, we're going to fight these aliens with the Marines. You run down towards the stairwell that you're on, and you see a scientist saying, you know, oh, thank goodness you're here. And then the Marine starts shooting at the scientist and guns him down. And it's like, first time playing through this game, it goes from just kind of, you know, what would seem at, you know, even now, just like generic, oh, science experiment gone wrong, to like truly adding levels and almost, should I say realism to this game, where like the military is not here to help you. They're here to cover their ass and, contain this situation entirely, which means killing you and your scientist buddies, which is just awesome. First time playthrough, story narrative, knocked it out of the park with this one. I remember being a kid watching my brothers and my dad play this game and hearing, why are you fighting the Marines? Well, they're here to kill us. Why are the Marines here to kill you? Because they want to contain this whole secret. And I was like, whoa. So I have a little bit of nostalgia, I guess, that's feeding into this one, but I think most would agree that that's what's really awesome about this. And so you learn that you have to fight the Marines, you have to kill them, and it's you or them. So you fight through them, and you have to kind of, run through some conveyor belts and a area where they kind of completely have it occupied. You can climb through the vents and hear them talking about how they killed a dozen scientists already and all this stuff. And the game teaches you, about this world, that it's just full of lies and backstabbing and nastiness, even amongst the people. Even though that you have this dreadful alien invasion, that it can be the people that are just as dangerous too. And this is where the combat really starts getting difficult. The aliens, Vortigons, bull squids, head crabs, and barnacles are all very predictable and workable to fight. They have animations that tell you when they're going to attack, but the Marines have AI of their own that really seems very, very intuitive, and some would even argue is better than Half-Life 2. So they'll take cover, they kind of communicate with each other, they'll rotate around the base to attack you and outposition and outflank you. And it's just such a well done chapter, and once again just builds off of the first two, where you're adding the suspense, and then the last two chapters we talked about, you've made this massive mistake and you think things can't get any worse. Well, they did. Now the military is here to kill you as well. We've got hostiles, I think, all the time about putting it in S tier, but I am just going to put it at the top of A tier. So one of my all-time favorite chapters, probably a top 3 moment in the story for me, is when this happens. Such a shocking plot twist, and it really brings life to the whole government-funded secret project idea. So really well done chapter. We've got hostiles, top of A tier. Chapter 6. Blast Pit. Now, I've seen some people claim this to be their favorite chapter in the game, so let's talk about it. You take your first ride on a tram car in the facility, and it stretches far. Pipes and a bottom floor covered in hazardous waste that it launches you into as it runs into a stop, and you are launched into the waste. And it's a good thing you got that hazard suit, right? You fight your way through some bull squids, head crabs, and houndeyes. You get to the top of this area of the facility, and you see a dying scientist who tells you, test fire the core and kill the damn thing before it grows any larger. And you open the door to see what this thing is after hearing this loud, terrible sounding banging on metal. And you just see a scientist get crashed through the window of the control room and against the wall. And you see this animation of this giant green tentacle thing grabbing him, and the scientist begging, get it off me, no, no. And it's just a great cinematic intro to this chapter. So playing it for the first time, I will say this one would be really tough to get, but there is a way that you can be, attentive and figure it out. Hear the security guard say, this thing hears you, it hears everything. And you will learn that you can distract the giant tentacles that are inside of this sort of cylindrical silo with grenades that they also shove in your face by giving you 15 that you can use at top. And if you also walk slowly using the shift, you can sneak around as it's doing that and it won't hear you. So what you have to do is, if you saw in the control room that the oxygen and the fuel and the power is off for this test fire, and you have to go down through that cylindrical silo in order to find the oxygen and the fuel and the power and turn it all back on. So in order to do so, you have to navigate this very, very, hazardous waste-filled and alien-infested corridor of this wide-open leveled facility, right? And so you go down this shaft in order to turn on the fuel and the oxygen, which are denoted by the red and the blue pipes that is also hinted at you into the control room. and so you can go and turn those on, but it's all useless without the power. So in order to navigate down to there, you have to go into an elevator that you hear creaking and that will fall, and you have to jump out of into a nearby ladder in order to avoid, dying and falling to your death inside of this elevator. And you see a scientist who's looking at the control panel down there for the power core, and he says, Smithers went down there and never came back, but we got to turn on this power. I hope no one tells me to go. Yep, that's right. You're going to be the one who's going to go down there. So you head down there, and you've got like these rotating seats that you go around and you climb up to the top, and then you see the generator where you can, turn it on by pressing the buttons on either side. And there's a scientist sitting up there at the top, and he says, don't tell anyone I'm up here. I'm not moving until the situation's improved. Little does he know. So you climb your way back up. You continue to distract the tentacles with your grenades. You fight through the head crabs, the vortigons, and the bull squids. You are able to get back to the top, to the control room. You see that the fuel and the oxygen, you've turned those back on. You do have to do a little bit of puzzling in order to get back from, when you're backtracking, because there's electrified water on the ground once you turn the power back on. But yeah, once you're able to get all the way back to the top, and turn on all of that kind of stuff, you will see that the fuel, oxygen, and power is all good and ready to go. So you press the test fire button, and these nasty tentacles that, if you've played it for the first time, probably killed you a dozen times already, you turn it on and they get incinerated by the engine that is resting above them, and you kill the blast pit tentacles, and it's just a really awesome chapter. There's a lot to do, lots of novelty and variety. It's kind of like your first boss fight of the game. So I really enjoy this chapter. I think it's S tier just because of how much there is to do. The puzzling, the platforming, the parkour, the different types of enemies, and the boss, the dialogue. Not really any narrative story heavy thing, but this is like you are knee deep in Half-Life at this point. Like, this is when you are going about as Gordon Freeman and solving these problems, and this is what the game is all about. So I understand why some people say that it's their favorite. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in S tier, but it remains to be seen if it will remain as my favorite chapter in all of Half-Life. But I understand the hype, and I get why some people say it's S tier. Up next, we have chapter 7, and that is Power Up. Now, this is very similar to Blast Pit in some ways, and I would understand why some people would talk down on it for that reason, but let's talk about why I really like Power Up. So you've just taken down your first boss in the tentacles, which is a stationary one, and now you are presented with the next one immediately, and it's the Gargantua, and you are shown it right away, right after Blast Pit, and you even see the G-Man present to witness the destructive capabilities of this enemy. You watch as Marines hopelessly open fire on it, and it just seems to be bulletproof, although at least in Black Mesa you can kill it with guns. He marches towards them and just hoses them down with superheated plasma from his arms, which have like cannons on them. He stomps, which creates a lethal shockwave, and he can strike you, of course, with his massive arms to damage you down. And you can try to fight him, like I said, but you will most definitely die, especially if it's your first time and you're playing on hard mode. So you could spend every round of ammunition, but there is another way to kill this thing. It is guarding the track power that you were told you need to use to get to the Lambda complex. So there's a little development in the story here, but you're at a crossroads. This thing is guarding it, so I guess we have to find a way to kill it, but we got to turn on this tram car either way. So you travel down, and you're going to have to power it up. So the place is littered with Marines. It's a lot of corridors and hallways, and you're introduced to some new weapons. Right at the end of Blast Pit, you get the trip mines, which are great in hallways, and the game is kind of encouraging you to learn how to use them by putting you in this situation. And not only that, the Marines aren't just littered throughout the place. This is where you really find out that they are really there to ambush you. Like, they're waiting for you in these corridors, and they just jump out like behind you, and every second that you think you're comfortable, you just get attacked out of nowhere, and it really keeps you on edge. If you make your way down to the bottom, you'll see the maintenance room for the power generator. You got to break some boxes to get that thing going again, and then you can turn the power back on. You fight your way back up through some more Houndeyes, some vortigons, and more Marines. You have an SMG at this point, so you find out the grenade launcher is also very good at handling bunches of these guys. And you are able to make your way back to the top after some, ruthless combat where you've probably died a couple times already. And you got the power on, and the tram car is ready to go, and the security guard who's up there and kind of instructing you says, you better go on without me and all that stuff. but you've got to kill this Gargantua. So once again, I said you could try to shoot this thing until it dies, but if you run your way down one of the open tunnels, you will see that there are these coils that are something you have to turn on in order to get the track power on. So it's not just turning on the generator downstairs. You got to turn this thing on. So the game does force you to do this. And if the Gargantua chases you in there and you turn on the coils while it's in between them, it will kill the Gargantua, which is just like another way that this game does such an awesome job of saying it's run, shoot, think, and survive, right? You've got to think sometimes, this thing is too big for me, Gordon Freeman, and my guns. I've got to think about this one, and you see the coils, and I couldn't imagine playing this for the first time and realizing this is how you kill the Gargantua. What an awesome follow-up to Blast Pit, where it's just another really creative way to kill a boss, and now the path is clear. You're able to use the track in the tram car and make your way through. And I just think it's a really awesome chapter. What I think it has over Blast Pit is the Marines. Fighting the Marines is what a lot of people talk about. It's one of the best parts of this game. And it's true. They have the best AI. They have guns to shoot at you too. You got to take cover and kind of really think about how you're going to approach those situations and the Gargantua. So I actually prefer Power Up over Blast Pit. You get on the tram car and it leads into the next one, but it's a super satisfying level, and I'm gonna put it as, I think, the best chapter in the game so far. Now we are at our very first of the more controversial chapters in the game, and that is going to be On a Rail. On a Rail consists of really two main sections, but what most people are frustrated at is the first part, and that involves the tram car. So this is the first taste in Half-Life of all the games of like vehicles, right? You can go forwards and backwards, but you are on a track and you can only really move along that. The security guard at the beginning says a scientist has a message for you. There's a rocket. You guys got to get into space. It's the only way you guys are going to get the situation with the alien invasion under control. So you begin to make your way through, and it's like a maze. I mean, it sends you through loops. There's these signs that you can shoot and flip the track kind of like a train track. Either go continue on straight or, make a turn instead. And there are, again, so many enemies throughout the maze, and it's really tough to make it out of this alive, especially on one playthrough if you're trying not to die. There's two parts throughout this where your tram car enters an elevator that rotates on its way up, and you're just surrounded by Marines, and you have to, shoot them on your way up or kind of jump out, and the second you make it to the top, a Marine shoots a grenade at you. Like, it is just really, really hard. And a lot of people won't even use the tram car. They'll just run through it. But the rail is electrified. So you really, you got to avoid it. And I'm typically someone who likes to play a game how it's intended to be played. So I will stay on the car. It's just like, yeah, I get why a lot of people don't like it. What I do like is you can kind of get out and explore and find ammo and health and stuff like that. And little funny things like, you're dead, Freeman, spelt incorrectly and stuff like that. There's a lot of sequences of these fights, and there's a lot to do in this chapter, but it's not even over once you get to the end of the tram car section, because you get to the silo where the rocket is that you need to launch. There's more Marines. You're already low on health, most likely. Before you get to that, though, there actually is a funny sequence where it's like, oh, who is this Freeman guy? You hear about these two Marines talking about you and how you're going to pay for what you did for killing their buddies. And then you can just like throw a grenade or a C4 right at their feet and blow them up right after they're done talking. That's funny. But yeah, getting through to that silo to launch the rocket is definitely not easy. It's not easy to survive, and it can get a little frustrating, and it can feel a little long. But that's not such a bad thing, right? It's not such a bad thing that there's like a lot going on in this chapter, but I do wish either they were two separate chapters or the tram car section was just a little bit shorter. I do think it's a little long. I don't think it's a bad chapter, but I'm definitely not, I don't think it's A tier. I don't think it's as good as the, We've Got Hostiles Office Complex or Unforeseen Consequences. So I'm going to put it in B tier because I feel like it does, it's got some problems, but there are some things that I do still appreciate about On a Rail. I mean, sending off the rocket is still a great accomplishment. And you feel like, hey, we're actually making some progress in this utter disaster. So B tier for On a Rail. Up next, we have one of my favorite chapters in the game, Apprehension. Now, this is what I would argue is definitely one of the best chapters in the game, and it really continues to carry the momentum that's some of it was stalled on a rail, compared to Power Up and Blast Pit, where you kind of know exactly what you're doing and you've got a clear goal. And then on a rail kind of slows you down. But this really picks it back up again. And you start by navigating through the facility. There's like hot electrical wires, and you're still fighting your way to the surface. And then you come across this aquatic monster, the ichthyosaur, that attacks a scientist that's in the water like a shark. And you're like, oh my God. You see a cage with a crossbow in it, and you navigate your way to the top control room where a scientist tells you that he was told this thing is from Earth, from Mariana's Trench, but that is clearly not the case. The scientist says you can give it a shot to try to take this thing out with the tranquilizer crossbow, which is one of the only 2 effective weapons you can use against this thing underwater. So you jump into the cage to grab the crossbow, and then it falls into the water, and you are lucky, especially if you're playing on hard, to land enough shots on the ichthyosaur with the crossbow before you have to come up for air. So you will have to kind of avoid this thing in the water as you pop up for air. And I think the best strategy is to just kind of find, a spot that's kind of sandwiched near the surface that it can't reach, where you can still shoot it under the water. I overall don't think it's too hard to kill, and it's really, really fun. So you can either stay in the cage, land enough shots, and then finish it off with the pistol, and just kind of run away or jump back into that same spot. After you kill that thing, you need to proceed on to the Lambda complex, where there's a team of scientists that are kind of trying to coach you to the Lambda complex, because they need you in order to help stop this madness. And you can escape to the other side of that portion of the facility by turning on this alternating arrangement of pistons and leaping from one to the next to the other side of the room. And you find a scientist who tells you that the military can actually track you along with the Lambda team, because there's trackers in your suit, which kind of explains why they're always able to ambush you. And I just love little details like that. And you have to go through this freezer, which is draining your suit power. You fight through head crabs and vortigons, and it doesn't do damage to you, but like I said, it takes away your suit power. You get to the other side of the freezer, and then you see a security guard who says, hey, I got a message for you, and then he gets shot by a silenced pistol. And you're like, what the hell? And you realize assassins with invisibility cloaks, at least on hard mode, are flooded with this area with the surface access. So you have to kind of find different ways to kill them, either by using the explosives or being really, really witty and accurate and kind of using your explosives and stuff like the trip mines. And I just love being forced to think like that. And that section is always a ton of fun. And then eventually you turn on the surface access, you run towards it. And then in that room, the lights go off and you are beaten down by a bunch of Marines. And then you are apprehended. So there's just so much going on in this level. I love the variety of the different pacings and the different kind of mini bosses with the ichthyosaur, and abundance of the assassins, and the freezer with the vortigons is like a different environment. So there's so many different challenges and puzzles, and I think it's a great way that the story moves forward. The only thing I wish is that it was like a little bit longer, and if that's what you're saying about a chapter, it did a good job. So Apprehension to me is my favorite chapter so far. It's just a little bit short, but tons of variety. Next chapter is chapter 10, Residue Processing. You've lost all your guns and you've been thrown in a trash compactor by these Marines that have taken you out, and instead they try to kill you instead of taking you to the surface for questioning. Big mistake on their part. You are able to find a crowbar on your way out, a magnum, and a pistol, as you are immediately surrounded by Houndeyes as you climb your way up the ladder out of there. You got to shoot the electrical box to get through, and then you are faced with what is the bulk of Residue Processing, which is basically, you get to the surface climbing out of there, and then you have to go in through a garbage silo to get back into the facility towards the Lambda complex, and you got to kind of go through the trash system of Black Mesa to find your way through. And it's just like, you're jumping across these garbage processor with like all these pistons, and it's like all these kind of Indiana Jones kind of style traps where you kind of have to time it right and avoid stuff. There's not really a lot of enemies, like a few head crabs here and there. There's no talking, and there's like this grinding gears, and then that's supposed to grind up all the garbage, this fire, you got to avoid, and then this conveyor belt you got to make your way through. And the first time you'd play this, it would be really hard to kind of find your way through. Even the first time I played it after a couple years, which was a few months ago, I had trouble getting through this. I had trouble finding my way, especially through that conveyor section. It was really frustrating. So I do understand the hate that it gets, but especially now, though, after playing it a couple times through, for replayability, you can actually get through this section really quickly in like 10 minutes or even less if you're really good. So it's like a huge change of pace from like the past 4 or 5 chapters that you've played. So I understand why a lot of people aren't big fans of it, and I'm even going to put it below Black Mesa Inbound just because I'd rather kind of go through that beginning part and be ushered through than, you know, navigate through all this kind of stuff. It's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with Black Mesa Inbound or Anomalous Materials, but there's just other chapters I'd rather play than Residue Processing. I know the platformer connoisseurs out there are probably, you know, getting ready to defend this in the comments, but for me, it's just not my favorite. So Residue Processing is C tier. Up next, Chapter 11, Questionable Ethics. And I love the names of a lot of these chapters. I mean, they're all named so well. For as much hate as Residue Processing gets, like, I think it's like just a funny name. And then Questionable Ethics, same thing. Like, you get to the end of Residue Processing and then you see a security guard who tells you the surface, you can't get through it because there's a scanner and you don't have the right clearance. You need a scientist in order to get through. So you get some of your guns back, and your goal is to find a scientist. There's a ton of Marines in your way. So you're fighting through some of the Marines. You get the SMG back, the shotgun back, and then you slowly start to see that there are captive aliens in Black Mesa, and they must have known about these aliens for a long time and been gathering them and studying them by some means. So like I said, there's tons of soldiers, bull squids, and head crabs you fight along the way. You get the crossbow back, the trip mines, and you kind of get your guns back pretty quickly. So, you know, the pain of losing them wasn't so bad. And then there's also this fun mechanic where in some of these rooms, you can lock yourself in the control room of it. And there's like this dangerous testing equipment that can go off and it will kill anything inside the room once the reaction goes off. And you can save health and ammo this way by luring stuff in and then just jumping in the control room and turning that on. I think stuff like that is always very fun. You come across dialogue scene eventually where you hear a security guard talking to a scientist using this weapon apparently, and then the scientist warns that it's not ready, that's why we're not using it. And he says make sure it doesn't overcharge, and the security guard goes, what do you mean overcharge? And then it blows up inside the room, obviously telling you, man, I need that weapon. So you run in there and then you find the Tau cannon or the Gauss gun, and this activates one of my favorite tracks in not just Half-Life 1, but all of the Half-Life games, as it does come up in Half-Life 2 as well. Nuclear Mission Jam, which is such a sick track. I wish I could turn the music up individually. Maybe I haven't figured that out, but it is just such an awesome track. It's kind of in an awkward spot in the game, to be honest. Like, I almost feel like it should be somewhere else, but this definitely enhances it for me a little bit. And in this section, this is a puzzle. You've got to activate these lasers to turn on this test laser. The test laser is in this room where it has a shield that comes down that is immune to the laser. But you can blow a hole through the wall to escape onto the next section by blocking the shield with a giant box that you can push over to it. And eventually you find your way to the other side of a room that you saw that was locked from one side. You can get the scientists that are in there that are trapped on the other side of a giant rotating surgical machine that killed one of their buddies who tried to make it across. So you got to get it to the other side, shut it off, and then go back to the other side of the room, grab a scientist to come with you, and then you bring him back to the scanner. So it looks like after Apprehension, this is one of the chapters that just has so much variety going on in it. You know, you're introduced to the alien grunts, you know, they're fighting the Marines, and I kind of feel like when the Marines, the aliens, and you are all fighting in one room, that is the purest form of Half-Life 1, and this chapter really has a ton of that and kind of introduces it to you. And there's lots going on with the story. You know, if it's your first time playing, you're like, man, they've known about all this and all that kind of stuff. So this is just a really classic chapter that I always really enjoy playing. Like I said, I love the track. You get a lot of your guns back. So for me, it's going to go right behind We've Got Hostiles in A tier. It's just a great chapter. I do wish it was a little longer sometimes. It's, once again, I'm not going to use that to take much away from it. Up next, Chapter 12, surface tension. Now, this is one that probably a lot of you were waiting for to see if I was going to do something controversial. I'm not going to. I'm going to just start off by putting this one at the very top of S tier. This is the best chapter in the game and the most iconic, and everything everyone says about it is true, from the length to how great it is, but honestly how difficult it is also true, especially on hard mode. It's so memorable, and it makes Black Mesa just feel enormous. You are able to get outside the facility and view the mesa and just see how out in the middle of nowhere you are on like this cliffside, and it just, like I said, it just makes it so immersive and awesome, and it plays the iconic track of the intro of the game and the intro of a lot of the Valve games for their logo, you know, with the low bass guitar or whatever. Seeing the tentacle out in the mesa, the Houndeyes. So it starts off with the Marines, you know, they're ready to ambush you right outside of the facility. Once you get out, you can blow them up, and then you see the helicopter and the dam sequence with the ichthyosaur and tower for the dam, where you got to turn off the turbines so that you can open up the gates and swim through them without getting chopped up to smithereens by those turbines. And this sequence alone can take a while, especially on hard mode. I always die so many times, but it's a challenge that really makes it enjoyable, and it forcing you to think and figure it out. And the first time I played this, after a while, I forgot to turn off the turbines, and I did not know what to do for a minute, so I was stuck. And it's always so rewarding when you figure out how to beat it again. After you get through there, you eventually find your way to a minefield, and you see that there's aliens and Marines like fighting, and you find an RPG that you can use to shoot and take down the helicopter. And it's just very, very satisfying once you get to the end of that minefield and you finally shoot down that helicopter that's been bothering you. I think you can take it out with a Tau cannon, but, you know, I kind of prefer to, it feels like, you know, the game intends for you to take it down with the RPG. You run into multiple tanks that are fighting with Marines, or that are fighting with Marines against aliens and against you, and it's just an all-out war on the surface that you are just kind of slipping and stumbling through. And don't forget the jump scare from the head crab from the pipe that, once again, if you haven't played for a while, like, it might get you, and it's just little details like that that are just so awesome. Eventually you get to a security guard who lets you back into the facility towards the Lambda complex, you know, after using some turrets and stuff like that to take out, you know, a swarm of Vortigons. And you navigate, I even forgot to, you know, talk about this. You get through this mine and explosive infested building where a scientist is trapped and won't move and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, you get to that security guard at the top who's like, I'm not going anywhere. The helicopter's dropping off the Marines and the aliens. You fight through those guys, and you get the security guard to the other side, and he lets you through. And then you see a Gargantua crush two Marines against a wall with a car, and you're like, shit, another one of these guys. I don't have any power coils to kill this guy with. And then you run through the tunnel, and then you see there's this artillery pad that you can use because a Marine has called in from the radio on the other side saying, if you have any last targets, call them in now and we will shoot them. And you can use that to kill the Gargantua, and you also have to use it to blow open the walls and the door into the next section of the facility. This, playing even just like a month ago when I was playing, only a few months after I had played the game again, still took me 2 hours to finish. It's one of the hardest chapters. The whack-a-mole section, where you're jumping through those to fight the tank, is definitely the hardest for me. And just, yeah, it's just an amazing chapter with so much going on. Complete and utter chaos. No hesitation. Best chapter in the game. There's a reason that everyone seems to agree about this. I do feel like it's a little long sometimes. Like, maybe there's one section or one half of a section that doesn't have to be there. But honestly, I'm not complaining. It's just a great part of the game. So, surface tension, S tier. Top of S tier. Next chapter is Forget About Freeman. Now, this one very much feels kind of like an extension of surface tension, and it begins with Marines saying over a radio, "Forget about Freeman, we are cutting our losses and pulling out," and it just makes it clear that the aliens are even overwhelming the U.S. military. And rather than it being a really long chapter, it's actually quite short in distance, but it's very, very dense. There is just an alien soldier around every corner, and a Vortigaunt and a Snark Nest, and you have to break through all of it. There's also this flooded section with the Ichthyosaur. You really can just run past it, but I prefer to kill it because screw those things. There's also some hazards you have to navigate, like some steam and some hot gas, some giant gears. And then at the end of the facility, you find some Marines stranded, hunkered up with a sentry gun. Those poor guys got left behind by their Marine buddies. And your RPG comes in handy after you get past them to the top, as there's a tank. You are loaded up with ammo right after blowing up the tank with all the explosives. You take an elevator down and proceed towards the Lambda Core. You find more tanks and Marines fighting for their lives against the aliens. You find the alien turret. Man, this part is so dense. I just find it just as hard as surface tension, especially it coming right after surface tension. You're almost never going into this section with full health. Just really hard to get through this in surface tension without dying a bunch of times. This chapter is, I feel like some people call it kind of redundant and meaningless, and I get what they mean. It does feel like an extension of surface tension, but I feel like it's fine. Like, there's nothing really bad I have to say about it, because it's like, I wouldn't complain about more surface tension, but at the same time, you do kind of want the story to progress. And it does do that by saying the Marines are going to leave. So it serves that purpose well. So for that sense, I'm going to put it in B tier ahead of On a Rail. It's definitely better than On a Rail. But yeah, I'm not like... I'm never over the moon to get through, forget about Freeman after surface tension. I kind of just want to get to Lambda Core and proceed with the story. So it's going in B tier. Up next, we've got Lambda Core. Now, this is another one of those chapters that has just kind of got everything in it, except it kind of features the most platforming that you've seen so far. You start off by having to fight your way into the entrance with another batch of assassins. Damn, they are so tough to kill. You see dead scientists who failed to make it to the sanctuary of Lambda Core. You reach the entrance, which is guarded by more alien soldiers that you must kill before the scientists let you in. And the one who does tell you that the other scientists are waiting for you at the reactor, and they can teleport you to the other world, but you're going to have to activate the reactor. You can pick up the gluon gun immediately after this from a scientist who has too much heart to use it on a living thing, but doesn't doubt your ability. And you can test it on some head crabs and some bull squids, and it's really the most effective weapon in the game overall, outside of kind of using the Tau cannon in certain ways. And you're ready. So you head down to the reactor control room, where a scientist tells you must activate both pumps to activate the reactor. So you have to fight through this sort of almost like nuclear looking reactor, where there's like these two hallways that are kind of parallel, and in one room at the end is like a bunch of alien grunts where you got to turn on the pump, and then at the other end is the same sort of thing, except the rooms are a little different, and there's just tons of Vortigaunts and alien grunts everywhere. So you fight through them, and then you get back to the main reactor, where you have to turn the wheels to get the pumps going, which raises the water level and allows you to climb into the next section, which is the actual reactor itself. You get into there, you have to kind of traverse to the top using this sequence of rotating teleporting platforms, and you got to kind of find out there's like 3 entrances and 3 levels, and at each of those levels you got to figure out which entrance is the right one to move closer and closer to the top. And once you finally figure that out, after getting teleported to different places where you got to fight back through and kind of restart, once you finally get to the top, you are teleported to the main reactor room, where you and a brave scientist who controls the portal ignition are working together to get this portal up and running so that you can jump through it. And you see your first swarm of alien controllers who are attacking you and the scientist. You got to kill them so that the scientist is undistracted and can open the portal. And you get the jump pack and all your guns and ammos if you miss them, except for the revolver right before this. You kill all the controllers, you buy enough time for the scientist, and you jump through the portal. And as you do, you can hear him screaming as he died right after holding that portal open for you. Just another tragedy at the hands of Gordon Freeman. How many people have died just for you. So Lambda Core really, really is. I struggle with it. I want to put it in S tier, but to be honest, I'm not such a big fan of, some of the platforming can be kind of frustrating. And when I was playing this with a marathon, it was very frustrating because I was trying to get through it a little quickly, and I realized just how hard it was to get through this chapter quickly, and there's so many enemies on the way there. It's kind of long, but honestly, it is definitely, most definitely one of the best chapters in the game. So I will put it at the top of A tier, but I think it's just a little frustrating compared to the top 4 chapters. But you definitely could make an argument that it's S tier. For me, for now, I'm just going to leave it in A tier. I'll kind of reevaluate at the end and see if I want to change that. Up next, we have Zen. You've done all this work through these 14 chapters to get through to this point, to the other world that you've been learning so much about. And what is it? It is just jump pack tutorial, and like, you know, there's some Vortigons, and they kind of introduce you to like the Zen sentry turrets and kind of the world of Zen, and it's pretty cool, and it's very impressive for the time, but it's very clear that it is unfinished. You hear a lot of people say that, like, you know, this is a portion of the game that they were kind of figuring out last minute and stuff like that, and it's so short. You can get through it in like 3 minutes. I suppose if you were exploring around, it'd be kind of neat, but it's actually not that intuitive, you know, how to get through to the end of this level, where there's like a teleporter at the bottom. You turn on like these 3 like crystal things that they accept these like butterfly things, and then it makes a portal in the middle, and it's like, okay, like that's the whole chapter, like, I guess. Honestly, I would rather go through Residue Processing than Zen. It's just short. It doesn't really bother me that much. It takes a little longer, I guess, than Residue Processing, but to me, it's just like, it's just not nearly as interesting. To me, the next couple chapters do Zen a lot more justice. For me, honestly, I'm gonna put Zen in D tier, and honestly, I'm gonna move Residue Processing down there with it, because it is kind of like, you know, would I rather play them than Black Mesa Inbound or Anomalous Materials in the start of the game? Kind of not really. I kind of would rather play the start of the game than these 2 chapters. If there were chapters I was going to skip, it would be these 2. There isn't really any talking either. This is where the talking pretty much ends for the game, for the most part. And yeah, so Zen is going in D tier. And nobody's really going to disagree with that. Up next, we got Gonarch's Lair. Now, this one is one of the last, like, kind of mini bosses you will verse throughout this game, and I've seen tons of mixed reviews on this one, and I kind of finally understand why. Initially, I would have said, you know, I don't really understand what people are complaining about with this game, or with this chapter. Like, I think it's kind of fun. Like, I think Gonarch, you know, the queen head crab, like, the head crab was the first enemy you're introduced to in the game, and it's like kind of interesting to see, like, oh, there's like this mother head crab, and she's got all these different attacks and stuff, and I do kind of like that. I do kind of enjoy fighting Gonarch. What I don't enjoy is what happened to me during my live stream, where Gonarch did not proceed. There's like 3 stages to this. You know, you shoot Gonarch enough times in stage 1, and she'll run on to the next one. Like, I suppose it makes it more cinematic and whatnot. To get her from that second to the third stage, and not to mention in the second one you can die by like just falling. I don't think that needs to be there, sort of thing, like, I guess because you're in Zen, but it's just not that enjoyable. When I was in the stream and I was trying to get to the third stage, you have to go behind Gonarch. You have to make sure Gonarch jumps down and then runs to jump into that bottom portion. But if you go ahead of her, she will just stay stuck up there. And if it's your first time playing, you're not going to know what to do, and you're going to be forced to go back and kind of figure it out by yourself. Watch a YouTube video and get a walkthrough. And it's like, you really kind of want to prevent that, in my opinion. So for me personally, like, I understand now why people aren't the biggest fans of Gonarch's Lair. I feel like it's very similar to On a Rail, where you can kind of go either way with it, but I feel like since it's a little bit more of like a bug issue sort of thing, I'm going to put it behind On a Rail, because On a Rail you can kind of avoid no matter what. Like, any of the bad stuff you don't like about it with Gonarch, like, yes, I guess you can't avoid it, but it was just a lot more frustrating. And not to mention, I hate those baby head crabs. Those things, when you're low on health and you're going into the next chapter of Interloper, and they go in with the portal next to you, you can shoot the hive hand as many times as you want. I swear, there's always going to be one of those things to follow you along and bite you in the next level and drain your health, which is a really hard level. So I really hated those things too. I do enjoy fighting Gonarch and like avoiding the attacks and stuff, but the baby head crabs, like, man, it's so hard to kill all of them. And yeah, I do understand the frustration now. So it's an alright chapter. It's gonna go in B tier though. Of like the combat chapters, like, it's definitely not one of my favorites. So it's gonna go into B tier. It's alright. Got the second to last chapter of the game, Interloper. You beat Gonarch. You are making your way to this alien that's on the other side that you were told about in Lambda Core that seems to be holding open this giant portal, letting these aliens through. So to begin, you're on a floating island infested with Vortigons. You probably don't have that much health from fighting Gonarch and the baby head crabs. And this island has these massive pillars, these holes in the ground that can launch you into the sky, and these alien crafts that you really need to land on. That's your goal on this island, to get to the other side and to jump into the portal. You can either launch yourself onto the tops of the pillars, or at the bottom level, you can quote unquote turn on a pillar by breaking sort of these like vines that are around it, and that'll cause it to rise back up, fall down all the way to the bottom where you can jump on, and then rise back up to its original height. And then you can kind of jump your way down onto the rotating platforms, onto shorter pillars, and then eventually onto one of the alien spacecrafts. The issue is these damn alien controllers and these Vortigons that you kind of have to avoid, or you're forced to kill all of them before you do this, because they just are going to harass you. They all have ranged attacks, and they're all like pinpoint accurate, the Vortigons at least, and the alien controllers are so hard to shoot through the sky. The revolver and the crossbow are your best bet for kind of taking them out, but it's just still really frustrating thing to kind of deal with as you're kind of platforming. So one interesting thing is you do kind of hear the Nihilanth speak to you. You don't really know what it is at this point, but you hear alone like you, alone like you, alone, and you're like, what the hell is that? And what do you mean alone? Like, what's going on with you? Adding depth to the story. Definitely a good job of that in Interloper. And then eventually you enter what appears to be an alien soldier factory with some initially friendly Vortigons that are kind of being enslaved, which you, if you didn't notice already, they got a collar and shackles on their wrists. So there is some platforming you do through here, but eventually you get to the next area and they will attack you after it appears that you've jumped into their conveyor line. And this part took me like 45 minutes, and I mean this part alone. While you're fighting through here, you have to kill at least a bunch of Vortigons at every section of it, and some alien grunts, and you might have to face more. If you end up using explosives, you're gonna break the barrels that contain the grunts, and bring more out that are going to fight you. It's kind of tough to navigate through this part, just very combat heavy. And then at the end, you're in this kind of, open cavern that's full of Vortigons and alien controllers. And it's just, I feel like there's just a little bit too many of them. You got these rotating platforms you got to jump up or ride up. So you really can't shoot anything because they rotate so fast while you're on your way up. So you're really vulnerable. It's just kind of frustrating getting through this part. And eventually you can get to the top, which, takes you to one last portal section, which is super easy. You just jump across and you get to the portal there, and it takes you to the final boss. It's not like awful. Like, it's just mostly like the combat difficulty and some of the platforming that isn't easy. But at this point, the game's already been kind of pretty long. Zen isn't super well done. And this is kind of dragging it out. So on a first time playthrough, I could see people giving up here because they're really not sure how many more chapters of this they're going to have to deal with. I mean, they dealt with, 15 chapters on Earth. How many of these chapters are you going to deal with? So, but it's their loss if they end up quitting. Ultimately, I don't think it ruins the game or anything, but this part is definitely super frustrating. I'm actually going to put it behind Gonarch's Lair. For all the bugs that exist with Gonarch's Lair, at least it's something very novel and creative. Interloper just seems like, an army that you kind of have to fight through, and you're kind of getting ammo and health and getting ready for that final boss battle. So Interloper for me is going in the bottom of B tier. It's not bad, but I honestly am just trying to get to the Nihilanth usually at this point, and I would never skip it, but it's just like I said, trying to get to the end at this point. Now we are finally at the last chapter of the game, the Nihilanth, and the first time playing this one, this boss is gonna get you. I mean, it's not very intuitive, at least to me when I was very young, what to do to defeat this thing. But there's a funny story I also want to include. I said it during the stream when my dad was playing this back in 98, early 2000s, and there was no YouTube, and you had to trust forums. as your way of assistance when you were stuck in a game. And he could not defeat the Nihilanth at the end. And there was this commenter on a forum who told him he had to launch himself on top of the Nihilanth and hit his open brain or hit his head with the crowbar until he died. And yes, he tried it for hours and could not kill him like that. I mean, I'm sure you actually could possibly damage him down like that, but you're going to die because you're right on top of him and he's just going to send you through portals and just continuously kill you. So that, I think, it's just a funny story. But yeah, you can't kill him like that. He's got powerful attacks that can basically one hit you, and he can also teleport you to different aliens where there's a bunch of alien controllers, which he appears to be like, you know, the father or queen of. And there's also ammo and health in there, but you'll usually have to traverse back to the top and return to where the original, you know, spot that teleported you into that room is. And that's honestly frustrating when that happens. The strategy that I find easiest to kill the Nihilanth is to just hide behind one of the giant, you know, triangles to avoid the attacks and the teleports, and to destroy the orangish yellow crystals around that he regenerates health from, which makes him then vulnerable. So once you do that, it's just a matter of taking cover when he attacks, or you can use the hive hand to shoot an NPC into the portal so that the portal goes away. And it's just a matter of damaging him down at that point. And once you learn that, it's actually quite easy to defeat this boss. It's a fair enough design, the way he looks, but man, is he kind of weird. I can only imagine the questions I would have playing this back then, like, what the hell is this thing? And then you finally defeat the Nihilanth and presumably close the portal and save Earth. And you think that's the end, but no. Then you finally meet the G-Man, who gives you his famous speech and ultimatum to Gordon, which leaves him in stasis at the end of the game. As much as this game gets a little long towards the end, the last few minutes for me really make up for it and really do an amazing job setting up the rest of the series. I mean, think, just what would this game be without the G-Man, right? Like, just that little detail that's trickled in throughout the game and then finally revealed to you at the end. You already had a ton of questions, like, who are these aliens? Like, what was the Nihilanth? And now you're like, what the hell is this G-Man thing that's been watching me the whole time and seemingly could have prevented a lot of this. Really, really interesting end to the game. I tend to think the story portion of it is like pretty good. Ultimately, I think it's a little frustrating. I'm going to put it ahead of Forget About Freeman. Just because Forget About Freeman's kind of repetitive, whereas Nihilanth is a lot more, you know, unique and has some novelty to it. I would love to put Lambda Core in S tier above like Blast Pit or Power Up or something like that. But honestly, like, I think the platforming really is like a lot more frustrating than anything you have to deal with in Power Up and Blast Pit. And it's those things that kind of halt your progress like over and over, like difficult platforming or like a ridiculous amount of enemies like an Interloper that I feel like really hold the chapter back. And I don't really feel like you have any of that in Apprehension, Power Up, or Blast Pit. Of course, surface tension's really hard, but it's all set up in what feels like ways that I guess make sense. So this is my Half-Life 1 chapters tier list. In D tier, we have Residue Processing and Zen chapters that, you know, I don't skip chapters when I play through these games, but if I did, I probably would skip Zen for sure. And then Residue Processing would be next in line. C tier, Black Mesa Inbound, you know, the beginning of the game does a good job. Nothing wrong with it, really. This is more of just like a story chapter kind of thing. Same thing with Anomalous Materials. Really enjoy, you know, talking to the scientists and stuff and kind of the story coming about, even though obviously I know what happens. Like, it's still just fun to me. And then kind of the actual chapters in the game with like a bunch of combat and stuff. Interloper, just really, really frustrating chapter. Want to get to the end of the game. A little too many enemies. You know, the platforming isn't that easy. And the controllers are really annoying to kill. Gonarch's Lair, kind of the bug thing that you have to deal with, and the baby head crabs are a pain in the ass. If you don't run into the bug, honestly, I feel like it's top of B tier or right behind the Nihilanth. On a rail, I understand the controversy with the, you know, the tram car and the navigating the maze and how long it is, but Half-Life is all about kind of the immersion and going on your own path and just kind of doing whatever you want. And Monorail gives you lots of opportunity to do that. So I put it ahead of Gonarch's Lair and Interloper. Forget about Freeman. It's a little redundant. It's kind of hard with all the alien grunts and everything you have to go through. But honestly, like, just manage your health and your ammo and you'll be fine, and you'll get on to Lambda Core, and it serves its purpose for the story. Nihilanth, you know, once you beat it once, like, you know how to do it. It's the end of the game. It does a fine job of closing out what was a spectacular game. So I'm just going to put it in B tier. It serves its purpose pretty well. It's got some interesting things about it, of course, with the Nihilanth and the G-Man. And then A tier, some of the best chapters in the game, most of them early on. Office Complex, just like really, really fun getting introduced to everything, not having all the weapons, and you kind of have to really, really be careful about how you approach the Vortigons and stuff, and the zombies and all that kind of stuff, and it just feels like apocalypse, right? It's just really fun. Unforeseen Consequences, same kind of thing. You know, you're dealing with a disaster, kind of your fault. Really great for the story. Awesome, you know, setting the atmosphere of the game. Very cinematic. All the scientists screaming, falling down the chambers and stuff. Questionable ethics. Similarly with some of the cinematic moments, but what do you mean overcharge? And, you know, you get all your weapons back, and every enemy in the game seems to be in one spot, and that's just very, very awesome to me. We've got Hostiles, you know, the big plot twist with the Marines. You're introduced to the Marine AI, and, you know, how you have to kind of fight them, and you can't just run and gun, or else you're gonna get completely destroyed. And just really good story development. Lambda Core, great story development. You finally understand what the goal really is going to be for you. And, you know, there's lots of different things in this. You know, the platforming, you know, the different types of aliens you got to fight through. There's puzzles turning on the pumps and stuff like that. I think it's just one of the more volatile chapters, in my opinion. I know some people don't like it that much, but I know some people really like it because they really like the platforming. But I feel it's like top of A tier. Sometimes this is one of my favorite chapters. And then S tier, the best chapters in the game. Blast Pit, mini boss, awesome mechanics. You know, fighting all the different enemies, the puzzles, the cinematics. It's super fun. Same thing with Power Up. So, you know, copy and paste from Blast Pit. The Gargantua, killing it with the coils. You know, all the Marines and the Houndeyes being in one spot is just awesome. So I give it the edge over Blast Pit, you know, Vortigons and Marines and everything fighting each other. You get the trip mines too. You really get to make yourself feel smart. Apprehension, second favorite chapter in the game. So since surface tension's kind of like, you know, an automatic, you know, first for most people, I feel like you can kind of consider Apprehension like my favorite, because there's just like, it feels like, you know, even with the last four, including Lambda Core, but Power Up and Blast Pit, like, these are like you're knee deep in this game, and this is what this game is all about. It's like these mini bosses you have to think, and you know, the Ichthyosaur and the Freezer and like the, you know, the assassins. It just feels like there's just so much depth in this chapter, and I just wish it was longer. I really do, but it's such a fun chapter nonetheless. And then surface tension. That is the game. That is like. Like I said, my stream was 7.5 hours. There's like 18 chapters, and this was an hour and 14 minutes, this chapter alone. This is quite the chunk of the game, and all of it is great. You know, the chopper, the dam, the Ichthyosaur, all the tanks, the warring Marines and alien grunts, and the tanks and the guns and all the writing on the wall, the minefield, the explosive building, everything about it. You know, I don't need to tell you why surface tension's great if you've played this game before. All right, so thank you all so much for watching my tier list video. This is the first one I've done for something gaming related, and I've really enjoyed it. Hope the gameplay that I put in there, you know, made it a little bit more enjoyable and immersive for you guys. And if you did enjoy, like I said, please do me a huge favor and drop a like on the video, and maybe check out some of the gameplay I posted of me playing Half-Life 1 in the marathon one sitting. Never done that before. That was awesome. And if you want to see more content like this, more gaming content, and even football content, which I will still be doing, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.